Hello, hi guys, welcome to Cafe IO. In today's video, we'll talk about a solution architect interview and how it progresses. So this is going to be more of a conversation style video rather than teach me trying to teach something. So stick with me for about 10 to 12, 15 minutes, and I'm gonna give some tips at the end of the video where you can find a way to navigate through the questions, also tips to salary negotiation. So let's get started. So typically when an interview starts, right, you kind of start with something which is called an icebreaker. You start by giving a general introduction about yourself, and this isn't more of a question. This is just trying to talk about what you have done. Now most people, or at least some people that I've interviewed, right, they get lost in their work experience and background. If they have 10 years of experience, they probably take 10-15 minutes to talk about their experience. I think learn to practice how to talk about your experience in 2 to 3 minutes, maximum 5 minutes, and try to talk about more recent things that are applicable for the job rather than top rather than probably everything in chronological order. They already have your resume and they know that, right? So you could probably talk about how long you have been an architect, what are your weaknesses as an architect, what are some of your strengths, how do you manage your time and stuff like that. I think when you give a introduction where you tell about your past, which is around projects, and also about yourself, that kind of starts with a good degree of curiosity with the interviewer. Then you kind of move on to some of a general solution architects interview, right? It will be something like if you were asked your colleagues to define your day in one word, what would they say? What are the goals as a solution architect? Where do you see yourself 3 years from now, 5 years from now? What are the specific skills you require? And these are more, again, more fishing question, trying to understand your psychology. One common question which I have seen is, how do you differentiate between solution architect and an enterprise architect? Sometimes it will be a software architect. So it's a good mixture of all of these roles that people try and ask and see if you understand the job well. It's also a good idea to be very specific from a deliverable standpoint when you are answering these questions, so that while you try to explain the job roles for each, you also demonstrate that you have a very tangible understanding of the deliverables. Most people, when they talk of job roles, they get lost in what the person does and forgets about the tangibility of it, which a lot of people in an interviews in a setting are looking for, if you understand or not. Whether the job requires or not is a different thing. A lot of times people are interviewing for different teams, so they follow a very generic pattern and they want to understand that, right? Sometimes people also want to understand what tech stack you have worked in, which is absolutely fine. People might also want to talk of why did you exited your, usually these kind of questions are towards the end, but some people do ask why are you leaving your current company, are you not happy, and stuff like that, and these are kind of okay questions. Now as you progress further, and my best guess is 10-15 minutes past, given an hour long of interview, people want to know a lot more about your projects, right? What are the type of projects you have worked, and this is a great place for you to demonstrate your knowledge as well as your understanding of the subject. Try to take the project and frame a story instead of trying to give the problem statement you solved to the very last level of detail. Try and generalize it, because it's very much possible that your previous experience is in a different domain, an interviewer is in a different domain. So if you give domain specific problems, that might not work, and the person might not connect to you well. So try to make it generic, try to make it an engineering problem, give the business context but make it an engineering problem, take it out and then pass it to the person, and then talk about what you have done. This way what you have done is you have made sure that the interviewer understood the engineering challenge or the development or the architecture challenge that you faced in the project, and that's a very critical thing to talk about. And then as you go along, right, you can talk about technologies, transformations, cost savings, give numbers, leadership experience, and these kind of things. So this kind of project would be, you sometimes people ask one project, sometimes people ask two projects, right? And you can make your story and select the best projects that you have worked. Usually there's couple within a 10 12 career, and there are some projects you definitely remember and want to talk about, right? So try to be very, very clear on the story that you're trying to tell. Now this might sound abstract, but when you're in an interview setting, you want to make sure that you start with a challenge and end with the answer and solution, and explain that how you demonstrated finding the solution, getting people together, making sure the deliverable is achieved, making sure timeline is achieved, keeping the people gelled together, maybe demonstrating an ability to show leadership and stuff like that. So these are some of the things which you should do. Also give good examples, right? How you collected information to solve problems, what are the duties that you realized, did you stepped up into different roles and things like that. So those are some of the I would still say generic question, and this probably is taking you close to halfway an interview. By now, usually what has happened is, if the interviewer is still talking to you and listening to you with curiosity, he or she has already made up his or her mind. Usually interviews, in my experience, first 10-15 minutes are selection and understanding process, and then the rest is more elimination. As the person talks to you more and listens to you, he or she understands what your experience is, tries and see if you are trying to meet the job role or not meet, and maybe you meet 70% and stuff like that. Now this is usually the case, not always. So it could happen that sometimes the description wasn't well and you applied for a role, got shortlisted, but the interviewer was looking for either a more broader skill than yours or a more deeper skill in that role, and that is absolutely fine. That happens all the time, right? So think about these things, and then I'll also want to add few nuances around this, right? Some people, instead of just talking of projects, they want to ask you, what's the most innovative project, what's the most challenging project, what's the project which where you learned the most, what's the project where you demonstrated a leadership experience, give an example of a project where you designed something from your own hand or hands-on experience and stuff like that, right? So be prepared for some of those questions, and this is where you are closing in on the 30-minute. After this, what happens is, if the interviewer is still talking, right, for a solution architect, there could be a gamut of questions depending on the talk. Usually it is expected that a scenario is given and there is no right or wrong answer. So when I interview people, I kind of have a very fixed pattern around this. I tend to start with a very, very simple design and then gradually scale it up, or I give a very complex problem and see how people solve it. There's some classics like elevator design and all those which you can find on the internet, but my problem is this. I say that I'm a vegetable owner and I was growing a surplus of vegetables and I was selling it good, but my sales were limited. Somebody suggested to go digital, and you are my architect. What's the best and the fastest possible stuff that you can enable me to sell digitally, assuming I develop everything in-house, right? That's an assumption I put in because I want to understand their architecture experience. Otherwise, some people have given me generic answers where they say that, hey, you can always do buy or sell, you can find CMSs, you can put it on Amazon, which are all right answers. Again, I'm not expecting a straight answer, but I want to understand their design experience. And usually the fastest answers are the best, right? Give me a 3-tier design, give me a simple web app. But then people have really, really complicated and blown it out of the way. Some people would go and plan this for entire country, and I haven't asked that. Neither have they asked me the question. What am I really looking for? I'm looking for the person to ask me those questions that, hey, how many numbers of users are you selling? Are you going to sell in one geography? How many SKUs are you going to keep? Do you want payment online, or do you want payment on cash on delivery? Do you want to make prepayments and all those? So a solution architects typically need to balance both sides. They need to balance the business side. They need to understand that context and then give a logical design and then translate into physical design. A lot of people have given me direct answers. They'll want to put, hey, I'll use AWS this, AWS that, AWS Lambda, ye wo, falana dhimkana. Does not work usually, because then what I do is, I start with, then if for the people who have asked this question, the next ladder for me is, I say that I introduce more products. I was only selling potatoes. Now I'm selling tomatoes, dhania, mirchi, all those vegetables and fruits and whatnot. So then they kind of, how do you scale this? So then they scale it up, given a certain way that they think they want to, upgrade from a monolith to a microservice where the product management category or the product service is separated and stuff like that. And it's okay to give a monolith as a first answer, right? Because if at first you are over engineering it, you are delaying my time to market, and that's a very critical parameter to understand. So that's how I would want an answer, and there's again no right answers, right? There's obviously multiple right answers. What I'm trying to say is I'm not looking for something specific. I'm just looking for an approach. And then what I do is when the person has solved this, right, my topmost degree of scale is I say I am the only farmer who sells online in the country, and every country literally buys from me, which is to say hundreds of tens of millions of people ordering from me day in and day out. Now how do you design this? Now at this stage, I'll be honest and say I don't have an answer in that moment, right? Why? Because this is not a problem that you solve within 15 minutes when your entire country is buying from one system. It's like Rome wasn't built in a day, and I want the architects to acknowledge that. But what happens and is a lot of people try to sell too heavy and bloated designs. But really where the conversation is I'm trying to see in their ability to build a roadmap, right? Build a roadmap that, hey, this is something you can do now, and then you should add, probably you should not do all a big bang approach. You should do probably state by state. You should do product category by product category, or whatsoever way, you can think of. So this simple problem usually takes 10-15 minutes and 20 minutes for me to, talk to people and understand what they're thinking, how they're thinking, and do it. And the rest of the conversation, there's a lot of, quizzes or random aptitude questions that I typically like to ask or have been asked, likewise. A lot of popular ones, some fun ones. A lot of people, if they don't give a scenario, what else, right? Then they'll want to get into the details of the tech stack that is usually employed at that company. This is good for a technology specific role like cloud architect focused on a certain cloud, but for solution architect it becomes very difficult because you may or may not have worked on the cloud. Although most concepts are interchangeable and translatable, it's the services that you really need to understand with depth, which can or cannot be mastered by a single person. It's very debatable. There's multi-cloud architects, but I tend to think that those are more certifications, but in reality it's very difficult to master. Like AWS has 200, Azure has 200, Google has 200, so it's very difficult to master like 500-600 services, understand the nitty-gritties of them. Even if you understand a certain class of services like big data services, you should have a general understanding of how different cloud providers portray them, how the pricing is worked, how computational calculation is stuff, and all that. A different category of question that I also ask solution architects is on capacity planning and estimation and sizing. I typically take the same problem. If we have started the scenario earlier, we typically take the same problem and get onto the some fundamentals and see if it's good, it's bad, it's not nice, etc., etc. So we typically do that, and then we can understand if the person knows how to manage cost, capex, opex. समझ आता है कि नहीं. General stuff, not too deep into the project management aspects of it and all that. Then I also like to talk about non-functional requirement, which has been asked to me a lot. The quality attributes of the system. You really want to grab your non-functionals by heart and understand how they contribute to system design overall as an architect. Because if you don't have that understanding, then a lot of times you tend to loosen up your answers in here or there. So that's an important aspect, non-functional requirement. And finally, my style is I tend to go to very raw fundamentals, something like an API design, REST versus SOAP, HETEOS, security, CRUD, some SQL questions. I've also asked sometimes processing, multi-processing, multi-threading. A lot of people mix threading and processing, which is for some reason a very common gap that happens. These are some of the directions I go. Then if I want to go into the deeper aspects of API design, I'll try to understand how to design, if they're aware of OpenAPI specifications, if they, if they're aware of in general any specifications, how do they test APIs, noun, verbs, naming conventions, stateful, stateless, how to handle security in a REST API, tokens, those kind of areas. So depending on the role, if there have been scenarios where I've been looking as an architect who helps design systems end to end, which is a web application. I'll probably focus on the web nature of solution architecture. But if I'm interviewing an architect who's more towards data analytics, which I largely have done, or the same has happened to me because I've played in that area largely, then I tend to move my questions towards a bit of Spark, understanding distributed systems, a bit of Kubernetes, a bit of Spark, data handling capabilities. Databases are a very, very fundamental thing that I typically tend to go deeper into there, try and understand some queries, joins, performance tunings, and stuff like that. So what I'm really looking for is what the architect is specialized in. I tend to think like a T alphabet, T-shaped skill, where you have a broad spectrum of knowledge and then you are deep in something, trying to find that and see if that's what I need in my role, or what my role needs. He has very limited experience. So this kind of allows me to take this up. Next, moving on to the next segment, and the what do we say, the salary negotiations. I think it's very personal conversation. I'll probably give couple of tips. Have a number in your mind, but don't give it out too easy. Don't get yourself dropped in the interview early on by quoting very high. Give yourself a room to play with, and if the HR is nice, he or she will understand given the seniority of the role. Sometimes people say, hey, you are getting 20 lakh, you can only get 30%, itna hoga. There are no standards in the market. Yes, when you talk to an HR, there will always be standards which are created within that conversation. Outside of that, I personally believe that if you have the skill, you can command a certain price. If you have been unfortunate in the past to not get a certain salary and you're looking for a correction, then it's a very different matter. But typically you can understand where you should be placed, where you're currently is, do a little bit of research about the company, how much they pay, use Glassdoor, and try to push your salary negotiations after, towards the end of the interview has happened. If you have been shortlisted, there are higher chances that they'll pay for you, because the whole process is usually a very difficult and daunting process for most people, trying to find the right fit. So if you tell the ask first, they can filter you up early, but if if they know of your ask later and you have already been shortlisted, there are better chances of you getting it, right? So that's something which I will definitely say. The second thing is, don't underquote, don't overquote. Both have risks. Underquoting will put you in a spot where since you are just looking for a rotation, then you'll realize I have I've quoted less, so I should do more. So you'll do more interviews, you'll take that offer letter and go to another place, get another letter, and then do all those stuff which HR hate, and most leaders also hate. So I am not a big proponent of that. In fact, if you are not going to join an organization, give them the lead time if you have already made up your mind, and do make up your mind, right? Don't keep everyone waiting for the last day. That's doesn't speak great from a professional perspective. I know it sounds like most people don't follow it. At least I have had people dropping out on me on the last day, last hour, on the day of the joining. I did not like that. It would have been nice if the person would have called me 5 days before and saying, hey Akash, I've gotten a higher salary, won't be able to join. That would have saved my 5 days. I would have understood it. Might have disliked the person in the moment, but that's always momentary. So it's always a good idea to give the HR a heads up that, hey, I'm not gonna join, this is not about salary, or even if it is about salary plus role, whatever is that. So do take that. Don't overquote yourself, because if you go too overboard, then the chances are you do not get shortlisted, and you risk losing the interview chances, and then as you grow senior, the number of calls you get continuously get reduced. So that's those are the two or few tips on the salary negotiation part. Don't want to get into specific numbers. I'm pretty sure all of you are aware of Glassdoor, and you can check out Glassdoor salary section for that specific company. I definitely believe that there are no standards around it, as HR says, and at least in that moment there aren't any. Somehow the if you are a candidate, there's usually a budget for a role, but that budget is not told to the person who's to the interviewee. And so let's say you are at 20 lakh and the budget is between 25 and 35 lakh, they'll still give you a 20% or 30% or 40%. But if another person is coming at 25 lakh, they'll still give him or her 20-30% or 40%. So if you are in the lower end of the spectrum, try to figure that out basis the conversation. Try to see, try to talk that you're flexible and you can do negotiations towards the end. That always increases your chances a bit. All right, that's me, Akar, signing off. That was a quick conversation around how to handle interviews for architecture interviews and how to do salary negotiations. If you want more videos on this topic, please put in comments. If you are looking for specific interview questions, specific type of interview questions, if you want me to get deeper into a certain scenario, please to put in your comments. All right, until next time, bye bye.